Hello everyone, my name is Wolfclock, and welcome to Betafied Mini, a new sub-series to Betafied for topics that don't quite have a place for an entire full-length Betafied episode. I would call this the first ever Betafied Mini, but back in 2018, I uploaded a video titled History of Mafia Town Themes, which was sort of similar to what this video aims to be, albeit much simpler and without any voiceover work. For this video in particular, we're going to be sticking to the facts exclusively, no theories this time around. Today, we're going to be looking over all the known in-development and alternative builds from before HatinTime's 1.0 release on Steam. Before we get started, here's a forewarning. This video is not being made as an open invitation to go out and try to stalk or harass users whom you might think have unarchived builds of the game. The HatinTime Cut content community has received a not-so-great reputation over the last few years due to a number of events that have occurred before. There has been more than one situation that has arisen in the past where a user, affiliated with the HatinTime Cut content or not, has found someone who they believe had unreleased files related to the game's development, and had taken it upon themselves to try and quote-unquote entice said person into giving them said files. Although, admittedly, some people have been keen enough to help with the archival project that they've shared some files, be it videos, pictures, etc., in response to users like these, there have also been multiple documented cases where the person requesting files has been rude, disrespectful, or annoying, and has potentially cost the entire community access to otherwise lost pieces of the game's history. Some of these events have also put us on less than ideal terms with Gears for Breakfast and other parts of the community. It's one thing when one former developer or tester contacts Gears for Breakfast and says that someone is asking for development files, but it is a whole other much worse thing for us when many different people report the same problem. So please, do not go out and harass people for files. Please, if you believe you may know someone who owns files that no one else has, such as videos that have not yet been archived, or even previously public builds of the game that are yet to be archived, instead of trying to get that user to give you the files directly, please tell them that we over at HatinTime Cut Content have an ongoing project to archive the development history of the game and point them our way. Someone who may have a personal archive will be more willing to share their files with a group that already has a large-scale archival project going on than they will for somebody who's just asking to download the files themselves. People who have come to us in the past are the reason why we have videos such as the long-fabled Hat Kids Lullaby video, as well as a number of pictures we've been looking for, including this picture of the Snatcher. I've also recently received messages from several different users eager to find out if their own copies of a HatinTime's Alpha were the same one that we already had archived or if they were different builds. So, please, keep inviting people to help us with our project, but don't try to force people to give you their files. One last thing before we get started. This video is about the known builds of the game. This does not necessarily mean that every build I go over in this video still exists, but for the sake of the game's timeline, some builds that may not even exist anymore will still be put into this list. And even if I can't give exact dates for each build, I will still attempt to put them all in chronological order. Hourglass Hub Build. It is known that at least one person still owns a build of the game that contains the Hourglass Hub. This build would be from an era that we refer to as the Calcite era, due to the old name of Mafia Town and its old theme. Unfortunately, this build owner is unable to show off or release their build. vGobaiano. This was an early press release build. For a little while, we had this, but by the request of Gears for Breakfast, we had to delete it. It uses different lighting than later versions of the game, and feels much more unfinished. Interestingly, this version had Mafia on Fire enabled, and is also built with the secret level _ rectangles. Narcissa Wright's build. This one appears to be a common YouTuber/streamer build, as it appears that Narcissa Wright's build was identical to the one that was owned by many other YouTubers around the same time. It has better lighting and more music than the previous build. We used to have this version archived, but had to delete it by request of Ears for Breakfast. vGaijin. This version was a late press release proto-build that had subcon in it. We don't know if the copy still exists, but at one point, Gaijin Goomba had his own prototype build of the game, which contained a 2013 version of the subcon forest, as seen in his video on the HatinTime. vPascalStiefel. A particularly late prototype build, which may have even been the last of these V-name builds, considering that Pascal was hired as the composer after Eric Gleiser had left the project. The only information we have for this build comes from the alpha, wherein which it is left over in the files for the prototype menu. This suggests that the alpha may have been built off of this version, or, in the very least, that this version was the last of its kind before Gears for Breakfast stopped making specific versions for individuals. Alpha version 1. This alpha build is also referred to as Alpha Day 1, Early Alpha, Alpha 0, or most commonly just Alpha. This is the earliest and most common build of the alpha. It was released February 20th, 2014. It contains the first act for Mafia Town, Vanessa's Manor, and Mafia Free Roam, as well as a number of time rifts. The safest, most known build was archived by Miss Switch, but there are many archives of it, including another common build from a user named Hello Kitty. All personal builds appear to be identical, but could have some slight differences due to downloading errors. Alpha Update 1. This build was released February 22nd, 2014, as the first update to the alpha. This update added underwater music to Mafia Town, a speedrunning timer, a button prompt to teach players how to dive when they first enter the water for the first time, some new controller options, and fixes for the dreaded Vanessa's Manor random death glitch, as well as some rendering bugs. Alpha Update 2. This build was released February 27th, 2014, and was mostly a bug fix update, fixing an issue with the invert option, a soft lock, disappearing collectibles, attacking in first person, and water rendering at lower quality settings, but also changed the double jump to be less demanding, changed the way wall sliding works, added a new music variant to the start of Act 1, and added a music volume setting. It is mentioned that the active badge can be swapped with Q or right trigger, but it's also mentioned that this was in a previous update and was simply not logged. Alpha Update 3. This build was released on March 5th, 2014. The main documented changes are some visual bug fixes. Middle mouse and right thumbstick now reset the camera. Some new settings have been added for volume and visuals, and, most importantly, the beach theme in Mafia Town was implemented. Alpha Update 4. This build was released on March 8th, 2014. This was a minor update to the alpha, with the most noteworthy points being that bokeh depth of field has been added and sound cues were added when keys are picked up in Vanessa's Manor. Alpha Update 5. This update is also referred to as Alpha 5 or Late Alpha. Alpha Update 5 was the final and most major update made to the alpha builds. It was released on March 26, 2014. It was the first build to have HatKid's health be reduced from 7 to 4. Before the health bar was finalized, this is what the health looked like in this update. In addition, there are many new settings for visual quality and gameplay. Some bugs have also been fixed, especially a bug with the Snatcher badge and save data being saved in the incorrect spot. The hub now uses its own music, as opposed to the Moonjumpers theme. In addition to these patch notes, we also know that this build contains a number of other differences to previous builds. To begin, The propeller upgrade and an unfinished obstacle course that leads to Mafia HQ exists in this build and can be accessed using commands. As well as this, we also know that the debug music room level now includes a cloud platform, thanks to this screenshot taken from the wiki. This build is major, as we know that some users still own it. If you or someone you know has this build, I highly encourage that you contact myself or another member of the HatinTime Cut content community. Beta version 1. This is also referred to as Early Beta, Beta 1.0, Beta 0, or simply Beta. This build is the first of the beta builds, and was released on March 11th, 2015. This is the most common build of the beta, and has been archived by a number of users, including Miss Switch and Hello Kitty. It contains all of the same levels as the alpha, as well as some additional levels, such as the Subcon Caves and Train Rush. It is also the first build that has a hub that the player can move freely around in without the use of console commands. Some notable points of interest in this one are that Mad Crows can jump, and the health bar has been finalized. Beta Updates 1 and 2. Unfortunately, the updates for the beta were never documented as extensively as the updates for the alpha. As a result, we don't know for certain when they released or what they contained. The only reason we know they exist is because we know about Beta Update 3. Speaking of which, Beta Update 3, also referred to as Final Beta, Late Beta, Beta Version 3, or, and this was a choice made by the community, not myself, the Smoky build. The Smoky build is the final update to the beta, and was released on March 30th, 2015. Through members of the community looking through it, we have a compiled list of a number of differences in this build. Thank you, Sonic, for the changelog. Most noticeably, some of the textures on the opening cutscene have been changed to the more finalized ones. The hover badge has been changed, with increased height and decreased duration. The Snatcher's Realm badge points have been increased from 4 needed to a total of 10 needed in order to craft the badge. And Mad Crows now work the way they do in the final game, no longer jumping. Inside the build, a lot of things have been changed for Subcon and Sand and Sails. For starters, the first version of the Water Flask is in, along with localizations for it. The Airmobile has been removed entirely. Please watch Betafied episode 5 to learn more about this. The Sandmobile now has a variant in the code that points to the Unreal Tournament 3 Scorpion vehicle. The vehicles have had an engine level change, which makes them no longer work in-game. And Deadly Heat safe volumes, which would have been used for Sand and Sails, are now in. In terms of Subcon-related changes, bonfires and paintings are now in, hence why this build is called the Smoky build. The cut beehives are in this build, using simple spheres instead of their final models. And fire spirits now have new dialogue that writes them in a completely different way than the final game or previous builds. The sunbursts, in addition to this, also have new dialogue. Xbox and PS4 initial release builds. Due to the necessity to port these builds to a different platform, they are slightly behind the PC 1.0 release, between September 9th and September 21st. As a result, they are missing some fine-tuning in some areas and have a fair number of differences to PC 1.0. I'll be doing a full video for all the differences in this build sometime in the future, but for now, A few of the more notable differences include the Mafia in the juice bar being able to sell the player a relic, the lack of a smooch button, and Mafia Boss still using his old beta lines during his monologue. Again, there will be a full video detailing all the noted differences in this build in the near future, so stay tuned for that one. We have 4 folder archives for the Speedrun Builds, thanks to user MissSwitch. 2 of these are playable builds, and the other 2 are unplayable pre- and post-speedrun events, quote-unquote, builds. Pre-Speedrun events. This is how the files were on September 14th of 2017. There is no cooked PC folder, and the files are relatively barren. I can't vouch for sure if this was just how MissSwitch's files were, or if everyone's files were like this, but this is how it looks for what we have archived. Speedrun event. This build was for the initial speedrun event that had taken place September 15th, 2017. This is, well, the whole speedrun event build. It's all here. This build only predates 1.0 by less than a month, so it's mostly the same as the initial PC release of the game. But there are some notable differences. Specifically, the smooch button is not in this build, as it was programmed in the Monday before the game's release. Speedrun Event Performance Build. For some reason, I was struggling to get this one to load. From what I know, it is exactly identical to the regular speedrun event build, except the crumbling cookie platforms in the Water Time Rift have been replaced with falling platforms, as part of the ongoing battle to decide whether or not the cookie platforms should stay with the new design for the Time Rifts. As well as this, the secret level, Mushroom Heaven, was removed. That cookie battle is a piece of history in itself, but it was something I was not there for, so I'll leave it to the Boop Troop user base to explain if they would like. Post-Speedrun event. These files are essentially the same as the pre-speedrun event. The files are dated September 30th, 2017. This concludes the known pre-1.0 builds of the game. I worked hard to ensure that we have all the correct facts for this one, but in case there was anything I missed, I'll give an addendum in the description below. Be sure to tune in for the next Betafied mini, where we'll be taking a look at all the post-release special builds. Until then, if you like videos like these, and are interested in the HatinTime's development, please join us over on the HatinTime Cut Content Discord community. Link is in the description. We're very friendly over there and are happy to bring new users up to date on the information that we know regarding the game's development. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to rate it, give feedback in the comments, and subscribe. It really helps me out. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.